Ruth arrives in Bethlehem as an immigrant. She is from a foreign country with no family or kin in Israel except Naomi, but she is only related to her by marriage. And to make things worse, she comes from a country which is a traditional enemy of Israel. You can almost hear the sneer in the voice of Boaz' chief steward as he said, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." Even Naomi has not received such a good welcome. She has been away too long, and she brought this foreigner back with her. So somebody had to go to work. Gleaning, following the harvesters and gathering what they left behind, was lawful, but it was only the poorest and most disadvantaged who would do that kind of work. But that was the category Ruth was now in. So she went to work gleaning, and as she did, she set an example to those who come after, which includes us. In this chapter, we see three things. Firstly, we see Ruth breaking down barriers. All the social barriers were up against Ruth. She was a young widow, and people of the time would have taken that as a mark of God's disapproval in itself. And she was also a foreigner. And she put herself in a situation where she might well have been sexually assaulted. Boaz had a group of young women whom he favoured during gleaning, but Ruth is not among them at the beginning of this chapter. She should have been right at the back. But she knows her job and gets right up among the sheaves where she knows the grains are. She is not afraid to assert her legal rights, even though it may mean defying social convention and challenging people's prejudices. And she gets noticed. It might appear that the steward noted her down as a troublemaker. But Boaz notices her too, and forms a very much more favourable opinion. So Ruth teaches us to break down barriers of human prejudice and to contend for what is right. Secondly, we see Boaz blessing. Boaz notices Ruth and forms a favourable impression of her. He asks who she is, and when he hears, he is even more interested. What attracts Boaz appears not to be Ruth's pretty face, though she probably had one of those as well, but her hard work. This was a very much patriarchal era, where women were expected to work for and obey their husbands. If she was working that hard for Naomi, she might work as hard for him. And he had heard of all that Ruth had done for Naomi. Not only was she hard working, but loving and compassionate too. In all respects, she sets an example to people of whatever gender. Hard work, love and compassion are attributes valued by God as well as Boaz. And even though there is an obvious male human desire in Boaz, there is also a sense in which Boaz represents God here. He notices the disregarded and marginal woman whose heart is in the right place, and he rewards her. Boaz protects her from being molested, invites her into the front rank of the gleaners, invites her to eat with him and his men, and even instructs his workers to leave her extra stalks. Suddenly, the outcast is drawn into the circle of God's people. Boaz prays that God will bless her, but he is already planning to be part of that blessing process himself. Thirdly, we see Ruth belonging. By the time the chapter finishes, Ruth is no longer the outcast immigrant. She is part of God's people and has a kinsman redeemer who will look after her and ensure her rights are protected. She has a share in the blessings of God's people, the harvest of the land and the protection of the law and of Israel's God. Even the outcast, the foreigner and the immigrant can be part of God's people and come under his care. All who show love and care and commit themselves to God and his people, as Ruth did in the last chapter, are accepted by him. And Jesus, Ruth's descendant, came to open that promise to all people from every part of the earth. Jesus, through David, is Ruth's descendant. He came to break down human social barriers, to offer blessing to all who would unite themselves to him, and to bring us to belong to God and his people forever. And he calls us to join him in this mission of breaking down barriers, bringing his blessing to people, and bringing them in so they belong. May we do so in the power his Spirit gives. Amen.